everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm so excited to be back with another tutorial since I haven't made one in a long time. So the last tutorial I made was the reversible bucket hat. Please check it out if you haven't seen it yet. For this tutorial, I'll be showing you how to clone your own shirt or to remake this drawstring shirt I'm wearing. This is also a beginner friendly tutorial, especially if you're struggling with drafting a shirt pattern. But before I start with this tutorial, please like this video and also subscribe to my channel if you haven't yet. The first thing you're going to do is to take your shirt and then lay it flat on a table, but please make sure that you've already ironed it so that it doesn't have any wrinkles when we trace it off. For the front part of the shirt, you need to trace out the shoulder seam, the armhole, the side seam, the hem, the button stand, and the neck area. You will start by pinning the shoulder seam, and you need to make sure that you rub the seam like this so that the seam line is in the middle. Please make sure that you don't pin it like this because as you can see, the seam line is not in the correct position. If you pin it like this, it will affect the fit of the shirt and also the measurements when we start drafting the pattern. This is how the seam should look after you've pinned it, and then now it's time to start pinning the side seam. And then now you must start unbuttoning your shirt and start pinning the button stand. You should also pin the neck area and also the collar stand so that it doesn't move around when we start tracing it out. Now you need to lift up your shirt like this, and the sleeve must be at the back of the shirt. Make sure the sleeve seam is positioned this way and then pin it in place. The next thing you need to do is to iron the areas you have pinned, which is the shoulder seam, the armhole seam, the side seam, and also the hem. Place your shirt on your paper, and the areas you need to trace out are the shoulder seam, the armhole, the side seam, and the hem. And also put something on top of the shirt so that it doesn't move around while you're tracing it out. In order to trace out the 4 areas I've just mentioned, you need to outline them by making dots around them. Starting from the shoulder seam, then work your way down to the hem. When you lift up your shirt after outlining the 4 areas, you will notice that your paper now has the dots that you have to connect with your ruler. Take your ruler and align it on the dot in the beginning of the shoulder seam to the dot on the end of the shoulder seam, and then draw a straight line across. Also keep in mind that it doesn't matter if the dots in the middle of the shoulder seam are above the straight line. Now you need to take your set square ruler and make sure you place it on the line like this, and then draw a straight line down, which is approximately 2 to 3 centimeters. So after adding the shoulder seam line, you can go ahead and draw in the side seam line. So now for the armhole area, you need your curved ruler to connect those dots. So now you need to trace out the neckline area, and for that you need to fold the collar to the back of the shirt like this and then pin it in place. And then after pinning the neckline, you need to place the shirt back on the paper and make sure that you align the shirt to the outline like this. You can either place something on top of the shirt so that it doesn't move around, or you can pin the shirt on the paper so that it's easier for when you start outlining it. After making sure that your shirt is stable on the paper, you can start tracing it out. Now take your set square and align it to the shoulder seam line, and then draw down a 1 centimeter line. And then take your curved ruler and start connecting the rest of the dots to create the neckline. To find the center front line, you need to draw the line from the neckline to the hemline. So when it comes to finding the hemline, you need to place your set square ruler like this up until the dots that are on the hem, and then make sure that it's parallel to the center front line. Then after that, you need to use the dots as a guide to draw the new hemline. And then finally take your marker and label your center front line. Now you must add the button stand, which is 3 centimeters wide. So on the left side of the center front line, I'll mark 1.5 centimeters. And then on the right side of the center front line, I'll also mark 1.5 centimeters. This will create the 3 centimeter button stand. And then after getting the 3 centimeter button stand, on the right hand side, you'll be adding another 3 centimeters. So in total, it's going to be 6 centimeters. Now to find the grain line, you need to take your red marker and add an arrow on the center front line. And then now you need to add 1 centimeter seam allowance next to the button stand. Now it's time to close the bottom and also the top part of the button stand, and to do that you'll need your set square, and make sure that the set square is parallel to the line at the end of the button stand. Now it's time to add the seam allowance, and the areas where I'll be adding the seam allowance is the neckline, the shoulder seam, the armhole area, the side seam, and also the hem area. I won't be adding the seam allowance on the button stand because I've already done that. The hem seam allowance is actually 2 centimeters and not 1 centimeters. Take your red marker and add the 3 notches on the button stand and also on the shoulder seam. And then in this clip, I actually had to change the hem allowance from 1 centimeter to 2 centimeters. And then finally, you can take your marker and start labeling your pattern. The next thing you need to do is to trace out your button stand. This is for the fuse strap that you need to fuse on the shirt later on. First, take your tracing mat and place it underneath your pattern. And then on top of the tracing mat, you need to stick a piece of paper. And then now it's time to trace out half of the button stand, including the seam allowance. And also don't forget to trace out the notches on top of the seam allowance and at the bottom. After tracing it, you can start redrawing it. And then when you're done redrawing it, you need to add the 2 notches in your red marker. After adding the notches, you can start labeling it. Then you can finally start cutting it out. This is how your button stand strap should look like. Now take your button stand strap and put it on top of your pattern to check if it fits. After completing the front part of the shirt, now it's time to make the back part of the shirt. The first thing you need to find is the center back line at the back of the shirt. And to find it, you need to first lift up your shirt like this and then place your 2 collar folds like this, then pin it in place. After pinning your collar in half, you need to also start pinning the side seams together. When you're done pinning the side seams and also the collar, your shirt should now look like this when it's folded in half. And then now pin the bottom part of the shirt, which will now reveal the center back line. Your shirt should look like this after pinning the side seam, the hem, the middle of the collar, and also the front part of the collar. And then now add another pin in the middle of the center back line to secure it. Now iron or press the center back line. After ironing the center back line, you should now remove the pins. And then you'll notice that the center back line is now more visible at the back of the shirt. And then now you need to button up the front part of the shirt. Just like I've done with the front part of the shirt, I'll start by pinning the shoulder seam, the armhole seam, and then the side seam, and then finally the hem. So I'm going to start by pinning the shoulder seam. And remember to make sure that your seam is positioned like this before pinning it. And then now you need to fold the sleeve towards the front part of the shirt and then start pinning along the armhole seam. And then start pinning the side seam. After pinning the side seam, you can start pinning the hemline. And then iron all the areas you just pinned. After ironing your shirt, it should be now nice and flat and ready for the next step, which is to trace it out on a piece of paper. Now place your shirt on a piece of paper because it's time to trace out the shoulder seam, the armhole seam, the side seam, and also the hem, just like we did with the front. Now remove the shirt, and you also notice that your paper now has the dots, which you need to start connecting with your straight ruler, your set square, and also your curve ruler, the same way we did with the front part of the shirt. Now you need to trace out the collar part of the shirt, and to do that, the first thing you need to do is to fold over your collar like that and start pinning it. And don't forget to iron the collar area after pinning it. Place the shirt back on the paper so you can start tracing out the collar, and it also has to align with the other part of the shirt that you traced out already. To make the tracing process easier, you can place something on top of the shirt, or you can also pin the shirt on the paper. Take your straight ruler and draw the center back line, which starts by the beginning of the collar and ends at the beginning of the hemline. And then use your set square ruler to find the corner by the collar. Also use it to draw your hem, but make sure that it's parallel to the center back line. Use your curve ruler to draw out the rest of the neck area. Use your black marker to label the center back line. The next step is to add the seam allowance, and the areas where I'll be adding the seam allowance is the neck area, the shoulder seam, the armhole area, the side seam, and also the hem. On the center back line, I will not be adding any seam allowance. Before I can start adding the seam allowance, I first have to go back to the front shirt pattern and measure the shoulder seam. From here to here, the measurement I got is 19 centimeters. And then now you need to measure the back shoulder seam, and the measurement I got is 20 centimeters, which means I have to remove 1 centimeter from the armhole area like this. Only do this if your front and back shoulder seam are not the same measurement. If both your shoulder seams are the same measurement, you can skip this part. After removing the 1 centimeter from the shoulder seam, the next thing you need to do is to take your set square and then square down 1 to 2 centimeters. Use your curve ruler to blend in the rest of the armhole. Now measure the side seams of the back shirt and also the front shirt. The front side seam measurement is 15.5 centimeters. Then the back side seam measurement I got is 13 centimeters, which means I have to extend the back side seam and make it 15.5 centimeters like the front. Then now I can check if both side seams are 15.5 centimeters. Add 1 centimeter seam allowance around the neckline, the shoulder seam, the underarm area, the side seam, and then for the hem we need to add 2 centimeters. And then on the center back line, you need to add your unfold symbol, which is basically this arrow, but I'll explain later on what it means and what you have to do with it. When it comes to adding the notches for the back, you need to make sure that they are the same as the ones on the front pattern. Especially the shoulder, the side seam, and also the hem will have the same notches. Now you have to label the back pattern. After labeling the pattern, you can start cutting it out. Take your front and back pattern and place them side by side, and then you're going to put the side seams together like this and check if they are the same length. Then do the same thing to the shoulders. Now you need to find the measurement on the neck area, and to do that you have to measure from here to here. Use your measuring tape and write it down. Now find the back neck area by measuring from this point to this point. Also write down the button stand measurement, which is 1.5 centimeters. Take your paper and use press stick to stick it on your table, and then use your set square ruler to draw a line across in the middle of the paper. From here to here mark 3 centimeters, and that will be point A. From point A to point C is going to be 9.5 centimeters, which is your back measurement. From point C to point B is going to be 9 centimeters, which is your front neck measurement. 2 centimeters going up from B, make a mark. Now pivot the 9 centimeters from C to B upwards to the 2 centimeter mark you made. After your ruler has reached the 2 centimeter mark, you need to make another mark on the new 9 centimeters, which is point B1, and then draw a straight line from C to B1. Use your curve ruler to smooth out the line on point C. Then erase the previous pointy line. Connect B1 to B with your ruler. Now place your set square ruler on point A. Make sure it's parallel to the line. Now draw a 3 centimeter line from point A to point D. And then again from point C, square down 3 centimeters to point E. And then from point B, you need to add 1 centimeter down, and that will be point F. So B1 to F will be 3 centimeters. Now connect D, E, and F with your ruler. Use your curve ruler to make the line on point E smoother, then erase the previous line. To find point G, you first have to extend the line from F. Then the measurement from F to G is 1.5 centimeters. Use your curve ruler to connect B1 to G. Go in from B1 by 1 centimeter to find H. Place your square ruler on the C to H line and make sure it's parallel to that line, and then draw a 8 centimeter line which starts from point H all the way down to point I. From point E, mark down 2 centimeters to find point J. From point D to K, the measurement will be 2 centimeters. Use your ruler to connect K, J, and I. Then use your curve ruler to smooth out the line on J. Take your marker or pen and label the top one as your collar stand. And then label the bottom one your collar fall. Now take 2 different colored markers, and the blue one is going to be my collar stand, and then the purple one will be the collar fall. Now use your ruler to draw out diagonal lines for the collar stand. Use your other marker to draw out diagonal lines going the opposite direction on the collar fall. The blue one is the collar stand, and then the purple one is the collar fall. Now you need to trace both of them out, and to do that you'll need a tracing mat and a piece of paper, but make sure that it has press stick so that you can stick it on the tracing mat. Now place your collar pattern on the piece of paper, then use your tracing wheel to trace out the collar stand, which is the blue one. Also trace out the line by H. I'll explain why later. The next thing to trace out is the collar fall, which is the purple one. Now remove the pattern and start redrawing both the collar stand and the collar fall. So the next step is to add the seam allowance, starting off with the collar stand. Add 0.6 centimeters around here and 1 centimeters at the bottom. And then for the undercollar, I'm going to add 0.6 millimeters all around. Now you need to label your collar stand and undercollar. Now add the unfold arrow here and also here. I previously said you need to trace out the line on point H, and now you're going to need to add your first notch on that point H. The second notch is on the seam allowance. The third notch is on point F. The fourth one is on point E. And then the last one is on point K. On the under collar, the first one is going to be on point A and add 2 notches there. The second notch is going to be on point C and then add 1 on the seam allowance. Add the last one on point J and then start cutting out both the collar stand and the under collar. Now you need to draft your top collar, and to do that you will need to take your under collar and place it on a piece of paper, then start tracing it out. And then make sure you also trace out the notches and then start redrawing the top collar. Add a 3mm seam allowance on the right side and also the bottom. And then now label the top collar. Add the unfold arrow here. And then add the notches. After adding the notches, you can start cutting it out. Here are the complete pieces. This is your top collar, this is your under collar, and then this is your collar stand. Now you need to draft the sleeve pattern, starting off with the front part of the sleeve. The first thing you need to do is to pin the sleeve seam together. And then pin the middle part of the sleeve, starting off at the top part of the shoulder seam. Place your sleeve on top of a piece of paper and start outlining the middle part of the sleeve and also the seam area. And please do not include the cuff area. Remove your shirt and use your ruler to connect the dots. Also remember to place your ruler on the first dot and also on the last dot. If the ones in the middle don't meet up in the line, it doesn't matter. Now to trace off the front armhole seam, you first have to lift up your shirt like this and then start pinning around that seam. On your front underarm seam, you need to place this point to this point and then this point to this point. Now trace it out, and also remember you can put something on the shirt or pin it on the paper so that it doesn't move around. Use your curve ruler to connect the dots. On the back sleeve, you'll be tracing out these 3 areas, and keep in mind that the back sleeve has this opening along with the buttons. Now place the back sleeve next to the front sleeve pattern like this, and then trace out this part of the sleeve. Use your set square ruler to find the bottom line and make sure that it's parallel to the line in the middle. Now it's time to trace out the back underarm area. First fold and pin your shirt like this. For the back armhole, place this point to this point and then this point to that point. Use your curve ruler to connect the dots. On the front shirt, add a notch from here to here, which is about 8 centimeters. And then on the back shirt, add 2 notches from here to here, which is 13 centimeters. Now add 1 centimeter seam allowance around the shirt sleeve. On the front side of the sleeve, from here to here is 8 centimeters. You have to add 1 notch. And then the back side from here to here is 13 centimeters. And then you have to add 2 notches. Add a grain line on the center line. Add a notch on the seam allowance above the center line. And add notches on the side seams. Also add notches on the hem. On the back part of the sleeve, from here to here, make a 5 centimeter mark. From the 5 centimeter mark, draw a line going upwards, which is 10 centimeters. And then at the end of the line, you must add the circle along with the notch. Now cut out your sleeve and then label it. On the bottom part of your sleeve, measure here to here. The measurement I got is 24 centimeters. On your cuff, measure this area and I got 7 centimeters. And then on a piece of paper, draw this rectangle with these dimensions. Add 1 centimeter seam allowance around the cuff and then add the grain line. Now add 6 notches on these areas. This line here is called your fold line, so label it. And then label the rest of the cuff. Then cut it out. So these are all the pattern pieces you'll need to make your shirt, which I'll do in part 2 of this tutorial. So please like, comment, subscribe to my channel if you haven't yet, and thank you for watching this video.